Welcome back, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brut. It is an honor to be sitting with you as we prepare to record the second episode on Rav Chaim Kanievsky's Chumash, Seforim, and Kontresim. Once again, all the Rav Chaim Kanievsky episodes have been graciously dedicated by an anonymous sponsor in memory of Rav Moshe Chaim ben Rav Yitzchak David. May his neshama have an aliyah, and all the learning that comes out and knowledge from these lectures should be as chus for his neshama. We thank the sponsor again. Rabbi Brut has some challenges today with his voice, so bear with him. He couldn't hold back from releasing another episode, so we don't want to deny everybody the opportunity to hear him. He's also going to talk about a podcast that he released on his Musings of a Book Collector, which once again we talk about. For those who want to learn more about Rabbi Brut's work, just visit his website, eliezerbrut.com. You know, he is somebody who has set up a website with all his work, and you could follow him there. And without further ado, Rabbi Doctor.
Okay, so number one is just to apologize. My voice has given me problems the past few weeks. So it's not the recording aspects. We have to thank Asher Tessa for being on top of that. Kaseder, he's mamish doing an amazing job with that. So it's my fault. So I have to respond about the voice. That's number one. Number two is that since we're talking about Chumash, this is the second episode of Reb Chaim Kanievsky and Chumash. So just this week, I recorded an episode not related to Reb Chaim so much, but more about the Ramban al Torah. It's a long episode, so you could listen maybe when you're having difficulties falling asleep. It's and it can be found on Musings of a Book Collector, which is hosted on Aldaf, and also on, if you search the web, it should be at least one or two other places that it is. Okay, so now back to Reb Chaim. So basically, the first episode of Reb Chaim and the Chumash Seforim, I showed the different Seforim, the different thing. I tried to connect Reb Chaim to that. Similarly, we find the Vilna Gaon and his base Midrash was very into learning Chumash and Chumash Be'iyun. And Reb Chaim Kanievsky, consciously, subconsciously, there's some type of connection between that. So today, I'm going to go further into this, but before that, something relates to the Gra and a piece of Reb Chaim in Time Dekra that will give us a little idea of some of the greatness of Reb Chaim and his work on Chumash. A Kalacher Yad Ha'ara of his. So Taisus in Gittin, I think it's the first Taisus in Gittin, talks about the word get, Hamevi get. So Taisus talks about is what does the word get mean? Because is it referring specifically to Gittin Nashim? Also Shtar, Stam Shtar is also called get in other places. So in the course of the Taisus says, Umasha Noygen Lichtov Yud Bei Shurais beget. We have 12 lines in a get. Aimer Rabbeinu Tam Mishum the get gematria Yud Beis. A get is a gematria of 12. So that's why it has 12 lines. And Okay, so that's what the reason. The connection is that there's with the word get, which is spelled Gimel Tes, and the fact that we have 12 lines has to do with its gematria. Okay, so there's supposed to be a Vilna Gaon about this, where but we'll say from someone else first, and we'll say who that is in a second. We don't find the two letters Gimel and Tes. So there's some type of connection between the two, and now. So the question is, when we say that, does that have to do with why it's being called a get, and what's ultimately really happening over here? So there's a gra that people say over from the gra. There's different eschais of this gra, and it's as follows. The gra brings down, or the way they say it over, the gra talks about this taisis and says Yud Beis Shuras beget Amar Rabbeinu Tam Mishum the get begematria Yud Beis, that the letters Gimel and Tes is matria Beis. So says the gra. Hatam lama bachru beget shein lebir b'shum makam. There's no other explanation for the words get. You could really say ches dalid oizayin hey. You could just say chad oizah or Yud Beis shein gam kein misper zeh. that's also this number 12. Because it wants to have something going on with the Gimel Tes. Mishum she'ein b'lashon hakodesh shum teva. There's no words anywhere in the Torah shetiyenu shtei oises elu retzufos, that you'll find the letters Gimel and then afterwards a Tes. Laharos kinisfred hazug, that the couple is getting separated. That is the only time. So there's something unique between the letters Gimel Tes. So now, is this really without handling in the actual Taisus, what is going on in Taisus and what Taisus really wants, so that you could already look in the Marsha and the Taisus Yantif and others. But there's some type of cute remez that people, it's a very famous remez that people like to say over to connect such a thing, that's why it's get and yud beis. I mean, say that there's something behind the name get for Gerishin and yud beis Isis, and it has to do with this Nakuda, how we could, if you search the whole Torah, you'll never find the letters Gimel and then a Tes. Okay. So at first glance, this is something that someone would say, this is like a Gra type of thing. It's known he knew the Torah in such a systematic way, so he could instantly look and he could tell you there's such a thing. There's such a thing. Now, so what became famous is that Chaim in time of the Gra says like this: Kasu b'shem HaGra delkach nikra get mishum sha'isi is gimel tes loy matzinu smuchim zel zeh b'chol ha'psukim ulkachu simin la'archaka. It's a similar archaka. B'tzarachiyim, says Chaim Kanievsky. Why? The gam oisio is gimel kuf zayin tes zayin tzadik zayin samach tzadik loy matzasi smuchim b'psukim. So Chaim Kanievsky, with his incredible knowledge of Chumash, says that we do find a few places that there are other. I mean, say it's not unique to the letters. It's not unique to get. There's other cases of something being such a thing. So it says the Chaim get who are rishon she'einu samach. It's the first of many. Say you're right that there are others, but the get is the first. Say so that, and that's found in the remez of the Gra. Then he says that there's other nuschos, how people say of the Gra, and then maybe it won't be so problematic. Okay, now, so even if the Gra did not say it, I mean, say that Chaim Kanievsky is not catching the Gra in any form or another in this story, but already way back, Rabbi Yaakov Emden brings down in his notes on the Tishbi, which were only printed in the 1970s, but which is predating really the Gra, he says Darsha Rishumais say such a thing. They make this connection, and it turns out, on some level, the piece that I began with, it was a quote from the Sefer Chaim, from the brother of the Maral in his beautiful Sefer. So there's some type of remez, and the people and they plug it in and they talk about it with this taisis. So the point is, here we're seeing this unique aspect with Reb Chaim Kanievsky dealing with the Gra, okay, and now, so in general, the aspect of if the Gra said this or not is to make a very, very brief point, is that this has been discussed by many people over the years, that there's many things already in the lifetime, already immediately after the death of the Gra, they were concerned that people are going to say things over the Gra, from the name of the Gra, so they wanted to try to stop it, and everything that you said over from the name of the Gra had to be authenticated. Now the problem is that over time people didn't listen, and it became more and more that people would say over things in the name of the Gra, and that not necessarily really came from the Gra. So at one point there started coming out whole Seforim that had materials, and sometimes some of the materials people said, if you look very carefully, it can't be the Gra said this. There was sometimes an obvious question on something which was found in the Sefer. So the point is, it became a big topic over the years. Eventually, different people started to collect all the different materials, and they were able to demonstrate that they tried to figure out what is authentic Gra and what's less reliable. One person that gets a lot of credit for this is Rav Eliach, and eventually published a work called Pninim Mishulchan HaGra. Another person As Rav Kreuzer, he also published multiple times where they went out to collect all the things, sort of like varts and geschmack that people say over. Maybe in my day, a lot of times a Rebbe would say it on a Friday, he would tell you over some nice vart. It was fond of quoting it from a Divrei Eliyahu, and these type of tyrus. So the truth is that Darshe Shumais, that Rabbi Yaakov Emden calls it, there's a truth to it, because people used to like to say it, and you wanted to capture the audience, so you would say it, you tell it be'ilan gadol, so to speak. So that's why they would use the Gra's name, even though possibly the Gra didn't even say it, and there might even be a makar that you're allowed to do that la'alacha, to say it in the name of be'ilan gadol, so to speak. Okay. Anyway, it turns out, but LeMechseh, people do say it. The Pri Megadim talks about it in the Igros Pri Megadim, and there's a work in the same generation from Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Al-Ghazi and Kelis Yaakov that also says such a vart, and there are others. There are others that say it. As I said, the earliest source is really the brother, the Maral. Mashal Reb Shmuel Ashkenazi, in his copy of his Pninim Mishulchan HaGra, he notes a few different people that say it also. And okay, so now the question is there any way to make this story that Reb Chaim Kanievsky is the Chayr bomb question to make it not as big as a bomb kasha? So it's interesting is like this. A lot of times when people say over these small little varts, sometimes they, at a certain point in time, it gets lost in context, and not only in context, and it sort of becomes that there's different nuschais of how to say it, and in the ways that, certain ways that it could be said, the question won't be a question. Now, if you say it in the way that I was saying it, so then it might be a problem. But it turns out, in a conversation I was having with Rabbi Yosef Avivi, there's an interesting work called Shem Mishmuel, published way back, and in this work was published, I think the first time it was published was 1699. Okay, one of these Seforim on Chumash, fascinating, interesting stuff, a mixture of Pshat, Kabbalah, all different types of things. And in the Sefer, this Adam Gadol, he brings down that he heard from the Taisus Yantif that one day, the Taisus Yantif, he wrote a get, and it was during Parshas Vayechi. While he was doing Shnai Michra Targum that week, he gets to the Tzava of Yaakov, Pasuk Memtes Chavtes, and it says over there, Vayomer Aleim Ani Nesef El Ami. So, fine. The Taisus Yantif decided to look in the Tzava of Yaakov first, more carefully, and he noticed that it begins with the letter Aleph and it ends with the letter Taf. And that's what it is, Ani Ne'esaf. And it ends B'nei Ches V'yachoil L'tzavis. So he found that the whole Aleph base is there in this Tzava of Yaakov, except the letters Gimel and Tes. So he said, Remez shetzarich lemnoya atzmai melasader haget. Means say he himself, the Taisus Yantif that week was busy handling if he should be writing a get. So now it changes it. It's not the Kol HaTorah. It was in Parshas Vayechi, and it was a certain siman of that the Taisus Yantif was using, limiting it. Now, of course, I'm saying is the Sefer Chaim says this type of art, and Sefer Chaim is not totally at all in the Taisus Yantif, and Darshe Shumai said it. But the point is that we're taking it. We're sort of saying that it could be this was the nusach that the Vilna Gaon said it over. Not that the Gaon was Eisig in writing a get per se, but maybe the Gaon said this observation over there. And there was a lot of times people when they say over these sharp things, it gets lost. This was the marmakim that Rabbi Avivi found in the course of our discussion back and forth, and then he found that this work from this Shem Shmuel, he at one point hung out in Reb David Oppenheim's library, which we've discussed in the past, the fancy library. Now, Reb David Oppenheim, in his library, he had the Seder Gittin of Reb Yom Tov Lipman. And in there, it says this actual story that the Shem Shmuel brings. So, okay, so fine. So, but anyway, be that as it may, there's a lot of, there's always a discussion about it, and the main point to this is showing this uniqueness in mamish counting letters to letters and then going through the whole Torah to figure out if there are other combinations in with this to demonstrate Ad Kedei Kach Reb Chaim Kanievsky in his memory or whatever you want to call it. I'm trying to figure out terms to explain what it comes from, but this type of kayach that he had. Okay. So Mirza Hashem will try to mention some others soon. But now I want to step back, and this connects to what we began in the previous episode, and this actually is a chayiv that I owe from season 2, and that's like this. Already in season 1, in the first episode, one of the first things I mentioned was in the work on the Rambam, the Chaim Kanievsky brings thousands of Makairos to Rambams. And I said at the time that he brings it from an incredible wide range of materials, Nuga Einik materials that was being published, and crazy amount of Midrashim, Halacha, and Agadah that were only being published in our lifetimes, and some were a little earlier than our lifetimes, or at least in his lifetime. So he's using current data from all different places. So first, to begin, there's the Midrash Rabah. So every good Jew knows, you when you talk about Midrash, you tell it's a Midrash. So right away you go Midrash Rabah. So first, when I began working on these episodes of the Chaim Kanievsky, and I had no idea that it was going to be this long, and I was going to fall into this deep rabbit hole and take you, Rabbi Shwed, along with me into this terrible, dark thing. But the end is in sight, hopefully. And the point was, I came across that this ha'aras of Chaim Kanievsky on Gans Midrash Rabah, but it was only published once in the HaYashar edition in 1990. Okay, so I was trying to figure out how to get a copy, and around that time, I was in. This is after one of the first few episodes. I found myself in Lakewood, and I was in Taplin. And anyone who knows, any Seforim collector who knows anything about Taplin knows this is one of the Mekaymis of Gan Eden on this earth. And I said, okay, I go, and every time I go there, I have to time myself how much time I'm allowed to be there, because otherwise I'll be there too long. And I find on the shelf a beautiful edition of this Midrash Rabah with the ha'aras of Chaim Kanievsky. I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of hours. To pay for it, to be copied, it was very expensive, and I didn't want to do it. So I took it as one of the many signs that at least I should be yapping about Chaim Kanievsky, that I got it. That I don't have a sign for people that they should be listening. That will have to look. So anyway, going through those ha'aras already, they're talking about hundreds and hundreds of hours, and they were never published anywhere else. And since they're so unique, they're not an Otzar Chachma. And not only are they not an Otzar Chachma, almost no one really knows about them because it was published once. Okay, but anyway, so I'm throwing this out there as a yediyah. It's kedai to know, kedai to check up. Maybe you'll have luck in Taplin also to find these ha'aras and use them. Now, the ha'aras, Reb Chaim writes over there, these ha'aras when he learned Midrash Rabah when he was young. So it's very possible that over the years he added to it. But they're mostly marmakaimis of Gemaras. Once in a while, there could be a very big ha'ara. And LeMechseh, at one point, is a pirish, a few pages of on the Midrash, early pirish that was already published ages ago. So on that page, LeMechseh, I noticed he has like about 20 ha'aras. But in general, there could be pages that there's no ha'aras. But overall, when you're talking about Gans Midrash Rabah, there's a good hundreds and hundreds of ha'aras throughout over here. Okay. Continuing with this Asik of Midrash, I said a million times already, that's an exaggeration, but many times, Sefer HaYashar. There's this work called Sefer HaYashar, and in there, there's Reb Chaim Kanievsky used it all the time, and and not only that, at one point, an edition was published with his ha'aras. So today I hope to redeem my chayiv on that front too. Fine. So now, to begin this story, it goes like this. Last week I mentioned already that one of his early works on Chumash, which in my mind is very unknown, and anytime I tell people that Chaim has works on Chumash, they say, which works? I say, Time in the Kra. I say, what, he has other works? I say, yeah, he has a Sefer, it's called LeMechseh Ateik. It sounds weird, what is it? So I say, it's an incredible Sefer that it's worthy of knowing about. Knowing it, and today, so first we're going to explain, just to drop what the Sefer is, and it's follows. As I said many times, Reb Chaim wrote the shar of a Sefer, so he says as follows: the pasuk stam doesn't explain. What doesn't the pasuk say? Mi, uma, umasai, ukahai gavna. It doesn't give you information who's the person that we're talking about. It will say ish, and who's the ish? So sometimes you can figure out the context. Uma, umasai. Sometimes chronologically, you might want to know what's going on. Chazal beGemara Midrashim pirshu lana Gemara k'moish yivar b'Akdama, which I'm about to say. Misader al pi seder Tanakh. He didn't just do it for Chumash; he does this for Gans Tanakh, and over the years it was updated a bunch of times. The final edition is 92 pages. It's in the, and it can be bought in the Sefer HaBraises. It's its own section in the back. So in the introduction, Reb Chaim says the where he gets to LeMechseh Ateik is based on a Gemara in Pesachim Kuf Yates, which over there deals with releasing information of things that the Torah might have wanted hidden, and look over there in the Gemara and how Reb Chaim talks about it. And then he says like this: Matzina b'Tanach, Kama Psuk. So now he's emphasizing Tanakh, so it's not only a work on Chumash. He says like this: Kama Psukim Stum Kamay Vayomer Ish al Re'eu Vayimtzeu Ish Vayavek Ish Vayomer Ish al Achiv. The Einim Mefurish Mihu Ukai Gavna Harba. The Chazal Pirshu Mihu. Then it says like this. It says Vayihi Balaylahu Vayi Hayoim Be'etzem Hayoim, and it doesn't say Eze Yoim Yamim Rabim Imrav Eir Vav Loy Pirshu Kama. How much? So Chazal does. He says now like this. He says, to be honest, L'maisa Rashi a lot of times does say this. Everyone knows Asher Harba Mem Hevi Rashi Aval Nisher Harba V'Gam Lo Hevi Kol Hades. Rashi doesn't bring everyone. So Varisi Ki Toiv Lakid Oiris Medivri Chazal Midrashim Shahaya Biyadi. I'm going to collect from my knowledge Chazal and Midrashim, and I'm going to do it al pi Tanakh. Now, he says clearly, I'm not out to bring every single piece of data that he really has in his mind. He could start bringing you 25 Rishonim for each different thing. So he brings 1 or 2 Marmakaimis for each thing. Sometimes it could be a Machlaikis, and he says that's not a problem. So he already answers a question which is obvious in a lot of the cases. You'll see it could be a very big machlokes. And you could take further and go on until HaGra Torah. Now, so this work is an incredible work. Now we're recording on Parshas HaYashar. So I'm just going to mention briefly a few just examples just to give you a taste of what the idea of the Sefer. It says Vatama Sara. So he says, when did this happen? What's the date? So Chaim says, look in the Midrash Esther Rabah, Marcheshvan was Marcheshvan. It says Vayav Avram. So right away you learn the Rashi and everyone they're handling where's Avram coming from? So it says, the Midrash says Mehar Maria. Rashi brings down from Beersheba. The Ramban has a whole arichos about this. Netziv. Where is it coming from? And not only that, after you understand this piece, in time the Kra, Reb Chaim Kanievsky has a ganz arichos about it also, making a cheshbonus. And he says, but you look in Chazal. What does he say? Chazal, parentheses, Sefer HaYashar. What I just mentioned that I have to talk about to explain what that is. Then he says, what does Avraham say? What does it say in the Psukim? L'spay l'sara. Okay, but what was the hesped? It says, look in the Midrash Tanchuma, or Midrash Hagadol, this and this page, and you'll find out what the hesped was. Then it says, Lavram le'eni b'nei ches. He's in front of b'nei ches. Says Reb Chaim over here, Dalet Eidim Hayusham. There were 4 Eidim. How does Reb Chaim know this? Again, Sefer HaYashar. So B'Kitzer, you could see, this is and perhaps in a different episode we'll explore just to drop more some other examples, because the range of his, what I keep on calling data, where he's pulling this from, is remarkable. But this is an idea of a sefer, and a lot of times when you're learning Pashup Shar and Chumash, this is very, very useful, and especially in Nach, when a lot of times it's even harder. You don't have so many Rishonim, you don't have so many Midrashim. So this is an amazing tool. Okay, now so we get the Parshas Chayesara in the time of the cross. I mentioned he says right away when he's talking about this shaila of where is Avram coming from and everything. So he says a lashon kfar omer chazal b'sefer HaYashar. Fine. Then later on he says another thing when he's talking about another thing relating to Ephraim and this base and the Maras Machpelah. He says, look in the Tosefta de Targum in Yeshua. What in the world is this word called Tosefta Targum? So you say maybe one time he quotes it, but if you look especially in LeMechseh Ateik, you'll see he quotes this word Keseder and Nach. It's word called Tosefta Targum. So what's going on over here? Okay, so now, in order to understand this, we're going to backtrack and we're going to give a brief introduction and say very briefly a bunch of different ideas to explain Reb Chaim Kanievsky over here. And just to be fair is like this. Technically, what I'm about to say could take 6 or 7 episodes. I have Rachmanis. I'm not doing that. I'm trying to cram in a lot of just Rashi Prakim of some of the ideas, some of the Marmakaimis that are out there to explain Reb Chaim Kanievsky and all this. And there's some interesting chedushim about this also. That's like this. You open up this work, LeMechseh Ateik. So already right away, on the first page, which he's dealing with Parshas Bereshis, the first he talks. So he brings down something. So it's talking about Tatsheya Oretz Desha, Eitz Pri. So he brings down a piece of girsa. So says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, where do I have a girsa that relates to how many plants there were? Over 1,000, 1,290, and so now how does he know this? So Chaim Kanievsky says, if you look in the parish of the Rashbats on the piyut of the Ritzkeos, that's published in the Sefer Chafetz Matmainim. I'm like, what? B'kitzer, there's a little Sefer that was published way back, and this is actually, there's a whole nice long story relating to this little tiny Sefer. Somehow it got to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and in there, the Taka is a from Ber Goldberg, who published a lot of interesting stuff from manuscript. And over there, Taka is this Chibur, and Chaim Kanievsky, it seemed to have gotten to his hands. So we're seeing some random, interesting rishon that not too many people have, and how he's using it for a side thing. Then he says like this, there's another Maramakim for this Girsa of how many plants it were. He says, look in the Midrash ben Sira. Where is it found? In Otzar Midrashim, page Memvav. Okay. You go on a few pages later, and you find you could find other times that he brings this work, which is this interesting work of Midrash ben Sira. Okay, so now what's going on? What's this Midrash ben Sira, and what's happening? He's quoting it from where? He's quoting it from the Otzar Midrashim. Okay, so now we have to backtrack. Up till now, we've been saying is Reb Chaim Kanievsky is an expert in Midrash. So the chashivas of learning Midrash is obvious. It's a chelik of Torah. Menachem de Lonzano, or however I'm batching up the name, in his work Shtei Yados, at one point writes the chashivas of learning Agada. You have to make time to learn Agada. The Gemara has Agada, and you don't just cut it out. And we know about the famous work in Yankiv. And Midrash was actually for Balabatim. Throughout the ages, they used to learn it in shul. They did not have daf yomi shiur. They didn't have shiurim that are able to make today. It's mamish like you're watching television. Certain daf yomi shiurim. It's amazing what they're able to do with AI technology, and the yeda that people are able to do to make it interesting and entertaining. In those days, people didn't even have the training to even understand it. So what did they do? They wanted to be kaveya, to eat them, to learn something. They used to go. They listened to shiur Midrash. So throughout the generations, they used to learn Midrash. Now, throughout the generations, I'm talking is in the printing period of time. I don't know what the Hamoinam, if they learned Midrash, how they learned Midrash earlier, but in the times of the Rishonim, there were different collections of Midrashim put together by different people. Without going through all of them, one of the most famous ones is Yalkut Shimoni. Way back, it's a collection of Midrashi Halacha, Midrashi Agada, and for centuries, the go-to sefer if you wanted a Midrash was Yalkut Shimoni. LeMashal, the Magen Avraham wrote a chibur called Zeis Ranon. So you went into the Seforim store in those days, you couldn't go buy a Tyrus Kehanim. It was very rare. What you wanted to buy a Midrash Rabah, it was also not so simple to find. Yalkut Shimoni was more popular, and that's what it has, and that's where he parked and wrote on the Haggadah aspects and the Halacha aspects. And he wrote this incredible work, Zeis Ranon, which sadly it's almost not known. And when you look in standard Yalkut Shimonis, they have a kitzer of the Yalkut Shimoni. They have a kitzer of the Zeis Ranon of the Magen Avraham, not a complete version of his work. Okay. Moving further, there's works later on, Yalkut Chadash, Yalkut Ruveni, and these works are collections of material, likutim from sometimes Midrashim that they had, and sometimes Rishonim that they had. Okay. So, in the times of print, many different people were out there hunting for these Midrashim. There were a lot of lost works, and one such yid was Menachem de Lonzano. I'm botching his name, I apologize. But anyway, one of his goals in his incredible works was to track down manuscripts for different projects of his. Whether it was for his work on the Chumash and how to write a proper Sefer Torah with the Isis, with the Messiah. And he wrote the classic work Our Torah, recently published, which I hope to publish an article about it, about the significance of this work in a work that I'm about to publish. And in other works of his, one of the things he was using when tracking them manuscripts was to track down lost chazals, and he actually published the Midrash Haggadah Bereshis, and we even have a Brisa de Eliezer that it seems he published it, and it disappeared. And they only found, like 100 years ago, the first page of it, but the rest of it disappeared. So he was Isaac in publishing Midrashim, the Chidah published Midrashim, and a yid that was crazy Isaac in this, which relates to our story, is from the base Midrash of the HaGra, none other than Rabbi Avraham ben HaGra. Rabbi Avraham ben HaGra was a unique person. I might have mentioned him in the past, that sometimes there are people that that their fathers are such great people so that the sons completely get forgotten about, or almost forgotten about. One such yid that very little has been done about him, relatively, is Rabbi Avraham ben HaGra. He's very close with his father, and he's a very unique yid. And personally, I have to make a disclaimer that I have been working on Rabbi Avraham ben HaGra for many years. I hope to publish, if I win the lottery, one of the things I hope to publish is a dream, as one could dream, to publish a whole work about him. And in the course of my work about him, there's a work of his that's known, which is called Rav Polim. And the Rav Polim is this fascinating work. And how does it relate to our story? So when you open up the Rav Polim, which was published well after his death, it was published almost 100 years after he died, it says, "Ba'yiftachu makar l'kol midrashi chazal." He's going to collect all the different pieces that Rishonim and Achronim bring down b'shem midrashi chazal that we don't have. And when you look through this Sefer, it's mind-boggling the amount of Seforim that he had or tracked down or saw, and pieces in the name of Chazal that he had, and he puts them in the letter of the Aleph Beis, and all of a sudden you see, there's a lost Midrash like this, and there's a lost Midrash like that. And he'll collect the existing, LeMashal, say, Midrash Abchir. Okay, there's such a thing? Yeah. He says, where? How do I know about it? Yalkut Shimoni. And he brings a few passages. Then he'll say, Midrash Abagurian. What? Where's such a Midrash? So he'll show you places, the different Rishonim that bring it down. So his incredible Yeda, Sayin Rishonim, is remarkable, and his Yeda in piecing together. Now, what's the significance of knowing all this? So he says, in Hagdama, he says, many times there are pieces in Chazal that you could understand through the different Midrashim. So we say there's more to the story. And where is the more to the story? In Midrashim. L'mashal, when you, a lot of times you piece together a whole story, you learn a Gemara, it plays out much more in Halacha, in Agadah, obviously. All of a sudden you learn Agadah Gemara, and then you have a Midrash Rabah, and you have a Midrash Tanchuma. All of a sudden the different pieces, you learn it's a piece from Ruv Margolis. A lot of times you'll see him doing it just as an example. But many people, it's remarkable what you could do, and that's one thing. Another time he says it actually plays out in Halacha, and he has different examples. He gives some examples to that. And he says, over the years, he got this information, and he came across a piece from Yehudah Chassid that says, if someone was megala to you, if Hashem Yisbarach gave you that Hashem Yisbarach gave you a matana, and he was megala to you stuff, and you don't publish it, it's exela. So therefore, I feel I have to publish it, says Rabbi Avraham ben HaGra. Anyway, and this work, as I said, only came out many years afterwards, and we might touch on a little bit shortly some more significance about it. Okay, many different people were Isaac in Midrashim and writing Perushim on the Midrashim, especially from the base Midrash of the HaGra. Just to note, the Rashash, the Radal, and others. And other people also were Isaac in Midrash. There's many names over here, and we could discuss this at length. As I said, we're trying to keep 6 episodes into this episode. Continuing onwards, there were different people, I would call them, for lack of a better word, interesting people, and we'll clarify what I mean shortly, that worked on publishing Midrashim that you discover from all different manuscripts. One such Yid was a Yid, Aharon Yellnick, born in 1821, dies in 1893, and he publishes over the course of 20 years 6 volumes called Badi Midrashim, and in there is multiple Midrashim, all types of interesting Midrashim, about all different types of things, mostly relating to Agadah. And this Yid, a lot of academic literature has been spent on him, but he's one such Yid, and we'll see why he's important for our story. Another such Yid is the great famous Shlomo Buber, Reb Shlomo Buber. Reb Shlomo Buber was a wealthy businessman, a Galiciano Yid, who published numerous Midrashim from Ksav Yad. He would buy them. We have letters in a work that I'm about to publish from, in there's some letters that I have between him and the Dukduke Seforim, who was a book dealer. We have them handling about different manuscripts, him helping him get them, sometimes him using them, sometimes borrowing them, sometimes buying them and then publishing them, and Rishonim also. He published a ton. Now, it's famous, and this became famous in Chaim Kanievsky's lifetime. We mentioned it briefly, that at one point in time, I like to call them the gate watchers, said, how could you publish materials of Reb Shlomo Buber? And they were upset. I suspect there was not such good motives behind it. And they started up with this famous from mechon called Zichron Aharon, and they said to them, how could you publish materials of this Buber, all these Midrashim? Now, mind you, that for well over 100 years, all Bati Midrashim of all types are lined with numerous Midrashim and Rishonim that are published by this Buber, but they felt to be ma'ir that this new mechon, how dare you do it? Okay. So first they went to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and they asked Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Now, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, going through all this farm, quotes Buber all the time, all his Midrashim. So he says, the Chafetz Chaim already paskin its mutter. So he said, what? So first of all, the Chafetz Chaim rather uses his Rishonim, but then Reb Chaim Kanievsky showed off with his incredible, he didn't show off, I'm sorry for using such language, but he basically pointed to a Sharet Tzion where he quotes a ha'ara of Shlomo Buber. So everyone was out, wow, that was incredible. But Reb Chaim Kanievsky showing that he's using a comment of Buber himself, not just the Midrash. Okay, fine. Now, so at that time, they answered themselves up in a Yeshurin in volume 40, publishing some Munkacher letters showing the Munkacher, who was known to be a Kanoi, in contact with him. And there are numerous sources of Gedolim that had plenty of contact with him. At different points in time, I've maybe mentioned some of them. And just one letter, Rav Kook, which again, for some people is not necessarily Makar, but he writes a letter to Rav Shlomo Buber, and he says, Sefer Oyer Dai, he says, here is Ruchi Zakama Meyaz Baliyadi, Ein Befi Dai Toida, Lahashav Lamar Kefalo, Al Oisei Kvoide, Vavasi Lechabdeni, Bimone Yafe, Matane Kvoide, Vechamuda Zois. The Kitzer, he's very happy with this, and then he goes on to give him a bunch of Ha'aros, and what it helped him. Right away, he shows him a few different sugyas, what it helped him, through the information that he published of this from the Beis Medrash of Rashi. That was what he was referring to. Okay, anyway, the Malbim, we know a correspondence with him, and there's plenty of Gedolim that did have a correspondence with him. But what's significant is he's one of the people that are publishing Midrashim from manuscript for the first time with Ha'aris, and Chaim Kanievsky is using them. Another person was Eliezer Grenhaus, also a Talmud from the Beis Medrash of Berlin Seminary, a Musmach, a tremendous Chacham, but again, many Kanoim didn't like him. If you look in one of the books of Dov Galichovsky about Yerushalayim in the beginning of this century, of the 1900s, you'll see he has a whole article about him and whatever, without getting into the details about him. But he also was one of these Yidden that published many Midrashim. And the last two people to mention, to get to, is Shlomo Wertheimer, who publishes numerous Midrashim, and his Einikel goes ahead and publishes them again with updates, with Tikkunim, and amongst the different materials that he has is also Bati Midrash, similar, also collections of an incredible amount of Midrash. He also publishes materials from Gainim, Rishainim, and this is all, not all, but some of this is coming from the Kaira Gniza, and his significance and his role with the Kaira Gniza is its own story. And then the last person for the story is the Torah Shleima of Menachem Kasher, who deserves his own bunch of episodes, where he was using all the Midrashim of all these people and more, and puts them up the Seder Psukim, making it usable, and everyone loved the work when they use to learn Chumash, to see the connection between Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh, making it very easy on every pasuk. And then they're fat, gigantic volumes, but very worthwhile. So Reb Chaim Kanievsky is also using Torah Shleima. So now, what is the work that Chaim Kanievsky uses? Does he have Yellnick? Does he have Granit's work, Wertheimer's work? So it seems like this. Throughout the works of Chaim Kanievsky, he quotes a work called Otzar Midrashim. Okay, so this is a Yid, Yehudah Eisenstein. Okay, he lives to 102. He's born in 1854 and dies in 1956. He comes to America when he's pretty young, and he is beyond prolific. And he publishes many Seforim called Otzar. Otzar this, Otzar that, Otzar Drush, Otzar of Haggadahs. So it's a collection of Haggadahs. Otzar Masais, a collection of all the various travels, which Reb Chaim Kanievsky uses in other works of his. Otzar Vikuchim, you want to have all the Vikuchim that took place over the years. So you don't have time to go track them all down. You buy his volume. So he and one of the things that he did, which one of his most famous works is called Otzar Midrashim, which is he collected from multiple sources, and he gives credit to where he's getting them from. He doesn't steal and say I found all these Midrashim, but he uses the works of Yellnick and the works of Granite and Wertheimer, and each Midrash that he publishes, he has a whole introduction of what where this Midrash is coming from, what he's using. Sometimes it could be multiple cases. Now, so Chaim Kanievsky uses this hundreds of times, I would say, throughout his writings, and there's a wealth of Midrashim, a wide range of Midrashim could be found in this volume. It's published many, many times. Fine. So just to throw out there, this Eisenstein was an interesting Jew. And one of his things that he became famous for was he wrote an encyclopedia called Otzar Yisrael. He didn't write all the entries. He had all types of Yidden helping him for the entries. Rav Kook even wrote an entry in there, but a wide range of people wrote there. Now, there's a Yid, Usher Asser, who wrote a doctorate about this Eisenstein. It's called When an American Jew Produced Yehudah David Eisenstein and the First Hebrew Encyclopedia. And he deals with the whole story of this Eisenstein, and a fascinating read to read his doctorate on the subject. And he's a very interesting Yid. He also wrote memoirs, which deals with a lot about America, and that memoir actually got him in trouble. Now, I was told that in Reb Chaim Kanievsky's library there was a copy of the Otzar Yisrael also. I didn't see it, but I was told by friends that they did see it there. Now, but, okay, I don't know if Reb Chaim Kanievsky had it, but I came across a bunch of years ago that the famous Hungarian expert of Seforim, Yosef Kain, writes that he saw, before World War II, he learned in the yeshiva of the Satmar Rebbe. Satmar Rebbe is a nice kanoi. He said one of the things he remembers from the library was the set of Otzar Yisrael that was there. He says he thinks it was one of the lower shelves that people should have noticed it. But he noticed it. Okay. So what's the significance of this story with Otzar Yisrael? Why am I bringing this up? And why am I telling the Satmar Rebbe first? Is because, like many things, this is the subject of great controversy. And a few years ago, already there was a Yid who wrote about this a bunch of different times. A Yid who's a tremendous baki. His name is Yehudah Leib ben David, and he has very many interesting Seforim. So back in 2002, he published a Sefer called Shavim Yehudah, and in this piece, he has a criticism to various from companies for publishing different Seforim, and they're not careful what they publish and the information they bring from different people. So one such Sefer, he says, is the Otzar Yisrael, and some other Seforim, and Otzar Midrashim. He says it brings quotes from Sefer Minim and Apikarsim. Now, he's obviously referring to is that this Yellnick, when I said interesting Yid, I definitely could hear how certain people might call him even a min and apikairis. I'm not paskening, I have no blast clue, but that's what he's referring to. So now, his problem was about Otzar Yisrael also. Okay, he wrote this comment, and he's written about it a bunch of times, and there was a session called Beis Havad a bunch of years ago, and he said the same essay, this essay that he published, he also said it over there, because they're making a macha about various Seforim and various machons for publishing materials without being careful what they publish. Okay, so in Bnei Brak, this also became a conversation between Professor Yaakov Spiegel and Reb David Tzvi Hillman, where two articles are written about it back and forth between the two of them in the Yerushalayim journal. And the question was, is it kosher, is it mutter to use the Otzar Yisrael from this Eisenstein? And Reb David Hillman, who legendary for being a tremendous expert, but he was also a kanoi, located numerous passages in Eisenstein's autobiography that were very problematic, showing him to be, again, I'm using for lack of a better word, interesting Yid. So, fine. So now, between the macha of Hillman and the macha of this author of the Shevet Yehudah, so the question is, what about Otzar Midrashim? Now, mind you, I'm telling you is that for a period of over 50 years, Reb Chaim Kanievsky is using these notes. So says so turns out that the company HaYashar, which is based in Bnei Brak, they had a relationship with Reb Chaim, and they're the ones that published the Midrash Rabah I mentioned all the way in the beginning. So they write that they're republishing the Otzar Midrashim, but they're publishing something fascinating. At the end of the volume, they're going to have notes from Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and they go ahead and publish well over maybe 100 notes. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, page by page, he went through kashering up the pieces that are mutter to look at in Otzar Midrashim and are also to look. Okay. So they publish it. Fine. And he says, Reb Chaim says there are pieces that you gotta erase because they're against Chazal. The way it says in the Shar. Now I don't know who wrote this nusach because I told you many times Reb Chaim writes the Shar, but this is I'm not sure. It says by Mar Makam Lemkaimis Shamassiv Shaga Vahivi Dvarm Shein Ruach Chamim Noichemenu V'Yeshtem Chay L'Meichkam. You have to erase them. Fine. So says this Rabbi Leib ben David. But if that's the case, so why are they publishing it? When they're republishing Otzar Midrashim, they should take out all the passages that they now know Reb Chaim is saying is problematic. And does it mean that the rest of the Sefer is good? He's not clear. He asked Reb Chaim what should he do, and he said Reb Chaim answered him that he wanted you to be piled to erase it. So what does he do? He went to his own copy and he crosses out all these pieces. That's what Yehudah Leib does. Okay, Great. So now, but the question becomes, when you go look at these Ha'aros carefully, again, I'm not going to go through all these hundreds of Ha'aros, but one set of Ha'aros is relating to the Sefer, which we began talking about. And that is this Ben Sira work that Chaim quotes already in LeMechseh Ateik a few times. What's going on? So what's going on is like this, because if you look at Chaim's notes, Chaim says, "Ein lismay chal medrash zeh, ve'ein mechazal." But then Chaim says, "But I have a problem." L'maisa is a rachis rabasi. It brings it, and then a few lines later he says, "The Tashbitz of Maganavas brings it." So there's a struggle. So it's like not even clear after you see these notes of Chaim, what does he want you to cross out? Does he want you to look at this medrash or not? And if you go look in time of the Kra, you'll see he's using it. You look at LeMechseh Ateik, he's using it. So it's very unclear what's going on. But the question is more than that. What's really the story of this work? So again, time is short, but this work, Ben Sira, is not the famous Ben Sira way back. In the Middle Ages, there was a work that was known as Alpha Beta Ben Sira. And in this work, there's all different types of interesting passages. Time is short, so we're not going to even go into all the different aspects, but there are different interesting things in this Sefer. And just to quote very, very briefly, two things. One of them is, a question was asked, why do Ketanim die at the age of 8 days old? So he brings down a whole thing of that Lilis comes and kills them. And what you have to do is you have to have a special kameya. And if you don't have this kameya, and it says over here in this work what the kameya is, it has to be by the now. Turns out that the whole minig of Vachnacht, a famous minig in Klal Yisrael, has to do with this Nakuda, with this story. And there's a story that at a different time perhaps we'll tell much more, but it has to do with this work, this Alpha Beta Ben Sira. But what got this, I guess we could put it on famous, so to speak, is as follows. Who is this Sefer? So at one point in the beginning of the Sefer, it says, there's an incredible piece, and it says over there, it's talking about Ben Sira. How was Ben Sira conceived? And it says it somehow comes from the daughter of Yirmiyahu, Shepamachas Halach Yirmiyahu, Anavi Leveis HaMerchatz. And without going into all the particulars, the Midrash, this work says that there was some Zera, and through this, Nichnas HaZera B'meya, V'nis Abra. Okay, which is an incredible discussion in halacha and Paiskim talk about, because technically it's not even really possible, and there's a lot to do. Because of this, people got very nervous about this Sefer, and already way back, a famous maskil Ben Zev, he asked, "Adonenu Moirenu v'Rabbeinu Hagoyin Rabbi Berlin, what do you know about this thing, about Yirmiyahu and this weird story?" And he says like this. Why did he ask him? He says as follows: "Yehu hayabaki betalmud bemedrash besifrei safra v'tesefta v'chol davar midivri chacham lo inel mimenu upek kadosh amar lo minei v'lo miktsas nimtza b'divri chachamim." And then as Ben Zev goes on, and he says that Taka, it's a very problematic piece, and a lot of ink has been spilled about it. Ramatis Yorush, Strashon writes all about it, and others. Anyway, and so this piece of Lilas also there's a lot to discuss. The Tishbi brings it down. But the point is, this is an interesting work. And what we're seeing over here is that Reb Chaim is bringing through the Eitzim Midrashim this work. Okay. So now we're getting to the last part of the story for today, and that is as follows. Sefer HaYashar. So as I said, Reb Chaim brings it down Keseder. And basically, if I wanted to sum up what the Sefer HaYashar is, I would say is like this. A lot of times when you like to know the backstory of something. What does that mean? Chumash is not a history book. So when you learn Chumash, even if there's times that the Torah is Meirich, but we know as we learn Rashi and the Rishonim, you will see how the even when it looks like it's Arichos, Chazal and Rishonim, they have a whole explanations what is shot in this Arichos. But a lot of times you don't know the end of the story. What happened? L'mashal, Light. We know all about Light, and they save him. When does Light die? So you want to know the answer? You pull out your Sefer HaYashar. And numerous details that one might want to know about Chumash Bereshis, the backstory of the information is found in the Sefer HaYashar. So obviously, Reb Chaim Kanievsky is going to be using it often in his LeMechseh Ateik, because that's the goal, to tell you the backstory. So now the question becomes, is the Sefer HaYashar reliable or not? And what do we know about it? And what is Reb Chaim Kanievsky's role with this? So first, as a to mention a story like this. So over the years, I've collected different information, and I have Reb Chaim Kanievsky's work about the Sefer HaYashar. So last night, while I was preparing this, I do what many different people like to do. So over the past bunch of months, I decided I'm going to play with ChatGPT, and I want to see what ChatGPT tells me about the Sefer HaYashar. Maybe I'll get some more marmakaimus that I could steal and use in this year and not give it credit. So I asked ChatGPT, what do you know about the Sefer HaYashar? And he gives me this beautiful, well-written answer. I was like, wow. And it had 3 pieces of information. Now, I'm not trying in this year what I'm about to say. Also, I'm not trying to give all the information about it at all. But I wanted to, it says the Marshal brings it down in Yam Shel Shlomo. The Alshich brings it down a bunch of times. Okay, fine. Gewaldig. So I said, where's the Yam Shel Shlomo? So it tells me in Baba Kama, Perek, Zion, Simon this. Gewaldig. Okay. I go start looking at my Yam Shel Shlomo. Not there. So I say, which one? It's in this edition. And it doesn't stop tell me that it's there. It gives me a whole 4 lines. I say, it's not there. You're right. It's not there. So why did it send it to me? Okay. Then I say, Alshich. When I start asking, no, it doesn't exist. I said, okay, so where did it come from? He goes, a secondary source says that the Marshal and the Marshal and the Alshich. Okay, great. Who's that? He tells me Seidat Dairis. Now the Seidat Dairis uses the Sefer HaYashar a lot. So I was like, great. So the Sefer HaYashar says it. So he tells me, yeah, if you look in the Berlin edition, this and this year, fine. So the Taka is an edition. I go, look, it's not there. I said, what are you talking about? It's not there. You're right, it's not there. So what are you doing? You're giving me... So now, moral of the story was, it didn't give me one piece of accurate information. So I asked him, why are you doing such a thing? No, you have to understand how we work. And now, the reason why I'm telling you this is because I have been testing it on numerous things. There are many benefits to it with the quality of its writing skills in both Hebrew, English, and translation skills, but the information that it gives is baloney. But this is not even one aspect was right. Now, why am I upset? It's not because it gave me these 3 marmakaimis and they turned out not to be good. Is there tons of information on the internet that you could steal and get that ChatGPT should be able to find easily? So why is it making up fake information? You say, if I ask it a trick question and there's no information, it's okay. But to Sefer HaYashar, you could find on Wikipedia a good article, and you can find plenty of places without fancy things. So the answer is something's very strange, and you have to be very aware of this nakuda. But I heard recently Rabah Piansky spoke about it, but he didn't play around testing. He doesn't waste his time. I'm telling you, I waste my time. I tested it on numerous things, and in the future, I'll share with some of the different tests to see what it does. So back to the Sefer HaYashar, Reb Chaim Kanievsky. And that's what we'll conclude today. In 1625, a work comes out. This work becomes throughout the generations a bestseller. And I'm telling you, you give your curious 12-year-old kid wants to read this book, he's going to get tons of information. He'll be able to impress the Rebbe, the amount of information he's going to get. Lamashal, I said, you want to know who was the Eidim at the Maris Machpelah sale? It says the names of the people. We don't have any other source for it. Gewaldig. You want to impress your Rebbe? You go in, Rebbe, who are the 4 people? What 4 people? And who are the names? I'll tell you the names. How do you know? Sefer HaYashar, you don't know the Sefer HaYashar. Anyway, so already there's tons of Handelrai, the origin of the Sefer. Now, very mysterious who the person was. And the Hagdama makes a whole origin story. Okay, fine. But now, I'm not coming to say if it's reliable or not, but I'm coming to say this follows. Reb Chaim Kanievsky uses it, and I'm going to explain why he uses it in a second. But the Seidat Dairis, Goyin Oilam, the Radal, the Netziv a few times, and others use it. Menachem Kasher, I assume somewhere buried in the monstrosity work Torah Shlema, he has a ha'ara why he does use it, but he uses it at least in Chumash Bereshis a bunch of times I found, and many others. And obviously it's a long story to explain the why they use it and why possibly not. But since we're just focusing on Chaim Kanievsky, and that's how we'll conclude. So basically is back in 2003, someone publishes the work of Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and they say like this. They say, I'm publishing the Midrash Sefer HaYashar, and in it has the tziyunim of Reb Chaim Kanievsky, a few hundred tziyunim. Fine. So they have Hagdama from Reb Chaim Kanievsky. As you know, from all the episodes, I'm very fond of quoting the Hagdama. He says like this, Sefer HaYashar shalafanenu yesh l'stapek imhu medrash chazal mamish. He says like this: Ki loy matzasi l'rishonim shehaviu. I don't find Rishonim bring the Sefer HaYashar. Now, to understand this, B'kitzur Nimrod, there is a Sefer HaYashar brought by Rishonim, and there might even be pieces in here. But okay. Then he says like this: there's something called Sefer Mechemes B'nei Yaakov, Shehevihu Medrash B'fnei Yatzor Shenikain, Vel Yalkut Kaireu Medrash Vayisu. There's something called Mechemes B'nei Yaakov, which I'll elaborate on in a moment, and that is found, and there is such a Medrash, and I have it from how says Chaim my Otzar Midrashim of from Eisenstein. Came Divrei Hayam D'Maishu Medrash B'nei Yaakov, and it was Otzar Midrashim. So again, Chaim is telling you about my Otzar Midrashim Sefer. Aishu likud mi Gemara Midrashim Sefer Yusuf Masha Loinim Tzum Midrashim Sheyavadenu Bevadai Hayoloi Midrashim Kisveyad. Must be that the Sefer HaYashar had Kisveyad. Ki bekol davar maybe Masha Yalkut B'Shem Medrash Abchir Medrash Zeh Eni B'Yadenu V'Chin Hab Midrashim. Then he says it maybe he changed the lashon. So now he says when I was young I wrote a aris, and a lot of the aris I'll show you up as a Gemara here and there that there's a lot of overlaps of different pieces of information that I feel, says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, is enough of a case to make it that you could use it. Fine. That's what Chaim Kanievsky says with this. Fine. Now, there's a few more points that I would like to bring out, but being that we're already going very late, so I'll bring them up in the introduction of the last episode. But just to conclude, to sum up over here is like this. Reb Chaim Kanievsky is using this vast Midrashim, but not only the Midrash Rabah that he has as a Aris that everyone has in their shul, but even this Otzar Midrashim of Eisenstein, he has millions of Aris to say what's good, what's not. But as I said, it's not so pashut because there are works that are not so simple. And Chaim Kanievsky is aware of this, and he writes these Ha'aris. But then comes the Sefer HaYashar, that Gedolei Olam used, and there were different Gedolim that had tremendous Bekiyas, that they felt that they could use it. Now, there are people that question it, but Chaim Kanievsky is not coming to say it's a chazal that you can paskin on it. It's more like that that this relates to the series of season 2 where I dealt with Rishonim and Kisveyad, and that will continue with next time, Amir Tashem, to conclude this part and to move on with Reb Chaim and Chumash also.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brat. We're going to have to cut out that ChatGPT rant. I say cut it out, not cut it out that it shouldn't be in this episode. Of course, if you got till here, you've heard it already. But I think that's a highlight that everybody must hear, even if they don't make it through the whole episode. So thank you very much, and looking forward to future ChatGPT tests on information.